What would you do if the person you trusted most became the cruelest one in your life? That question echoed in my mind as Kevin approached, his eyes bloodshot with rage. You think you can talk back to me, Sarah? He hissed, and before I could even react, his fists slammed into my stomach. The pain surged, not just making it hard to breathe, but shaking every belief I once held. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as Kevin's fists clenched, his eyes burning with rage. You think you can talk back to me, Sarah? He hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Before I could even react, he lunged toward me, his face twisted in fury. In a flash, he raised both fists and slammed them into my stomach. The shockwave of pain tore through my already broken body, leaving me gasping for air. I clutched my sides, struggling to breathe, feeling helpless, trapped in a hospital bed that now felt like a prison. The metallic taste of fear filled my mouth as the sound of footsteps approached the door, but even that small noise felt distant, like it came from a different world. Was this the moment it all fell apart? Was this where I lost everything? My name is Sarah. I'm 43 years old, a housewife, and the mother of a 7-year-old daughter named Emma. From the outside, my life might seem perfect. Married to Kevin, a man who once promised me love and happiness, but appearances can be deceiving. When Kevin and I first met, he seemed to be everything I thought I wanted. He was confident, attentive, and effortlessly charming. He swept me off my feet with a smile that made my heart race. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party, and from the moment our eyes locked, something shifted inside me. I thought I had found my happily ever after. Kevin seemed perfect, always knowing the right things to say, the right gestures to make. Within a year, I was wearing his ring and planning a future that I believed would be filled with love and fulfillment. I left my steady job at an accounting firm to embrace the life Kevin envisioned for us, a traditional household where I would support his career and focus on our family. At first, it felt like the right decision. Kevin showered me with affection, surprising me with flowers and planning romantic evenings. His promises of a bright future made every sacrifice seem worthwhile. But once the honeymoon phase ended, the man I had married started to disappear. The warm, loving Kevin became distant and cold. Compliments turned into criticisms, and his thoughtful gestures vanished. Instead of asking how my day had gone, he started pointing out everything I hadn't done to his satisfaction. The spotless home and freshly cooked meals that once brought me joy became expectations, and anything less than perfection was met with his disapproval. Whenever I tried to express my feelings, Kevin would dismiss me with a smirk. "You're a housewife, Sarah," he'd say, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's not like you have a hard life." Those words cut deeper than I wanted to admit, but I swallowed my pain, convincing myself that I had to stay strong for Emma. She deserved a stable home, even if that meant enduring Kevin's growing indifference. Over time, I realized that the man I had fallen in love with had vanished completely. Kevin became a stranger, someone who no longer saw me as a partner, but as an object to command and criticize. What I once believed was a dream had transformed into a nightmare. Still, I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would change. Kevin's constant criticism became the soundtrack of my days, a dark cloud hanging over everything. No matter how much effort I put into keeping the house spotless or making sure dinner was on the table when he came home, it was never enough. "You missed a spot on the counter," he would mutter as he dropped his bag carelessly on the table. "Why isn't Emma ready for bed yet? What do you even do all day?" His words were like tiny, invisible cuts, slowly eroding my confidence, each one adding to the growing pile of self-doubt that I carried around like a heavy weight. At first, I tried to reason with him, explaining how much effort I put into managing everything, but my words always fell on deaf ears. "You're just making excuses, Sarah," he'd reply. "You have one job, to take care of this house and our family. Why is that so hard?" Kevin's frequent job changes only made things worse. Each time he came home with news of being let go or quitting, he would blame everyone but himself. His bosses were unfair, his co-workers incompetent, And yet somehow he managed to twist these failures into reasons why I was the one letting him down. "You're supposed to make things easier for me," he'd say. "Instead, you're just another problem I have to deal with." I often felt like I was raising two children, Emma and Kevin. While I did everything to make Emma's childhood happy and safe, Kevin's unpredictable moods made it a constant challenge. He would criticize her too, scolding her for minor things like leaving toys on the floor or talking too loudly. I found myself stepping in, trying to shield her from his harshness. "Don't take that tone with her," I'd say firmly, only for him to turn his anger on me. "Maybe if you taught her some discipline, I wouldn't have to," he'd snap back. As the years passed, I stopped trying to argue. It was exhausting, and I knew it would only escalate. Instead, I focused on Emma, pouring all my energy into giving her a sense of stability and love, even as my own spirit withered. Kevin, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on control. The man I had once admired had become someone I barely recognized, a man whose words and actions left me feeling small and invisible. And yet, I stayed, for Emma. I told myself for the hope that one day things might get better. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had just finished grocery shopping. My mind was preoccupied with the long list of tasks waiting for me at home. Preparing dinner, checking Emma's homework, and tidying up the kitchen. As I crossed the street with bags in hand, I never saw the car coming. The screech of tires and the blaring of the horn were the last things I heard before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, my body aching and immobilized. Both of my legs were in casts, and every breath sent sharp pain through my ribs. A nurse stood beside me, explaining that I had been hit by a speeding car. My injuries were severe, and my recovery would take months. In those first few days, I felt utterly helpless. Tasks I had taken for granted, sitting up, eating, even reaching for a glass of water, were impossible without assistance. My parents, Susan and Michael, became my lifeline, visiting me daily and taking care of Emma while I was confined to the hospital. They brought me meals, reassured me that Emma was doing fine, and tried to lift my spirits with their constant support. But Kevin was nowhere to be seen. I had expected him to rush to my side the moment he heard about the accident, but instead, there was only silence. The days bled into weeks, each one longer and heavier than the last, and still, he didn't come. Every time the door to my hospital room opened, I held my breath, hoping it would be him, but it never was. When the third week finally arrived, Kevin walked in, but his expression wasn't one of concern or guilt. It was annoyance and irritable, almost disgusted expression. He stood at the foot of my bed, arms crossed, as though I were the inconvenience, and without a trace of empathy, he spoke his first words since the accident. "Do you have any idea how much of a burden you've become?" His words landed with more force than the impact of the car that had shattered my body, knocking the wind from me, leaving me stunned in the sterile white bed. How could he say that? How could someone I had given so much to, someone I thought loved me, treat me with such cruelty? I stared at him, unable to comprehend the venom in his voice. "What do you mean?" I managed, my voice breaking with the weight of my confusion and hurt. Kevin repeated the words, his voice colder this time, sharper. "Do you have any idea how much of a burden you've become?" My broken body protested as I tried to sit up, but the pain was overwhelming. I looked at him in disbelief, the disbelief soon turning to anger and grief. "I didn't ask for this, Kevin. I didn't choose to be hit by a car." He scoffed and moved closer, looming over me as if I were a failure to be judged, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "You think that makes a difference?" His tone dripped with disdain. "You're lying here doing nothing. Now I have to handle everything. I can't afford this, Sarah. You need to figure it out." Tears welled up in my eyes as his words sliced through me. "Figure it out?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I can't even walk, Kevin. What do you expect me to do?" He glared at me, his expression hardening. "Sell your jewelry," he snapped. "You've got more than enough to cover this mess. I'm not wasting another dime on you." The shock of his cruelty rendered me speechless. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process the full weight of what he was saying. "You're serious?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? You're my husband, Kevin. You're supposed to support me." "Support you?" he barked, his voice rising in anger. "You're useless now, Sarah. I'm carrying this family on my back and you can't even do your part anymore." I felt the air in the room thicken, suffocating me as his fury turned into something more primal, more dangerous. His words seemed to be choking me, and for the first time, the reality of his contempt hit me like a truck. I couldn't stay silent anymore. "I've done nothing but support you, Kevin," I yelled, my voice hoarse from the effort. "I gave up my career for you. I raised our daughter. I kept our home running while you bounced from one job to another, and now, when I need you most, you call me useless?" His face twisted, and the rage on it was something I didn't recognize. "You think you can talk back to me?" he shouted, his fists slamming down on the edge of the bed, shaking the entire frame. "You don't get to make demands." I flinched at the violence in his words, but before I could even process it, he lunged forward, fists clenched tightly. His anger erupted with brutal force as he struck me in the stomach with both hands. Pain shot through my already broken body, and I gasped, struggling for breath as the room spun around me. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but the emotional devastation cut deeper than any physical pain. I stared at him, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. How had the man I loved, the man who had once promised to cherish me, become this person? How had he become a monster so consumed with his own needs that he could justify hurting me, even now? My mind screamed for clarity, but there was only the overwhelming, crushing pain, both physical and emotional. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I was trapped, both by the hospital bed and by the reality of this twisted version of the man I thought I knew. "What are you—" The pain from Kevin's attack radiated through my body, leaving me gasping and clutching my stomach. Before I could fully process what had happened, the door to my hospital room burst open. A nurse and a security guard rushed in, their faces a mixture of shock and determination. "What's going on here?" the nurse demanded, stepping between me and Kevin. "She provoked me," Kevin shouted defensively, his fists still clenched. "She's ruining my life." The security guard didn't hesitate. "Sir, step back now," he ordered, grabbing Kevin by the arm. Kevin resisted, but the guard tightened his grip. "You need to leave immediately." Kevin turned to me one last time, his face pale with fury. "You'll regret this, Sarah," he hissed. "This isn't over." As the guard escorted him out, I felt a mixture of fear and relief. My body ached, my heart was shattered, but for the first time I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer. Kevin's cruelty had reached a point of no return. The nurse leaned over me, checking my injuries. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded weakly. "Please just keep him away from me," I whispered. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. My parents, Susan and Michael, stepped in completely, ensuring I was never alone. They handled every detail, from caring for Emma to speaking with the hospital administration about filing a formal report against Kevin. Their unwavering support became my anchor in the storm. Physically, I was healing, but the emotional scars ran deeper. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kevin standing over me, his fists raised in rage. The memory of his attack replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. Despite the pain, I knew I had to take action, not just for myself, but for Emma. I began speaking with a lawyer, Amanda, who assured me that Kevin would be held accountable for his actions. "You've been through enough, Sarah," she said firmly. "It's time to fight back." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to take control of my life. The decision to fight back wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Kevin's violent outburst in the hospital had solidified what I already knew. I couldn't let him continue to control or harm me. For Emma's sake and my own, I had to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. With the support of my parents, I began gathering everything I needed for my case. Amanda, my lawyer, was a sharp and determined woman who quickly became my strongest ally. During our first meeting, she listened intently as I recounted years of Kevin's emotional abuse and the physical attack in the hospital. "You have a strong case, Sarah," Amanda assured me. "Between the hospital staff's testimonies and the medical records documenting your injuries, we can prove his actions beyond any doubt." Hearing those words gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I worked with Amanda to collect evidence, from the nurse's statements to photos of my bruises taken immediately after the incident. My parents also helped compile documentation showing Kevin's neglect and his history of financial irresponsibility. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture of a man who had spent years tearing me down. The legal process was grueling, but I refused to back down. Kevin, on the other hand, tried to intimidate me from the sidelines. He left voicemails alternating between empty apologies and thinly veiled threats. "You're ruining my life," he said in one. "If you think you can win, you're wrong." I didn't respond to any of his calls. Amanda advised me to remain silent and let the evidence speak for itself. "Don't give him the satisfaction of a reaction," she said. As the court date approached, I threw myself into my recovery. Physical therapy was excruciating, but each small victory, standing up for the first time, taking a single step, reminded me of my strength. Emma's bright laughter and my parents' unwavering support kept me going, even on the hardest days. I wasn't just preparing for a legal battle. I was reclaiming my life. For years, Kevin had stripped me of my confidence and independence. Now, I was determined to show him and myself that I was stronger than he ever imagined. The day of the hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and determination. Dressed in a simple yet confident outfit, I walked into the courtroom with Amanda by my side. My parents sat in the gallery, their reassuring smiles a constant source of strength. Emma, too young to understand the situation, stayed at home with a trusted babysitter. Kevin was already seated at the defense table, his once confident demeanor replaced by visible unease. His lawyer whispered hardly in his ear, but his eyes kept darting toward me. The man who had always tried to dominate me now looked like a shadow of himself. Amanda began the case with a clear and precise recounting of Kevin's actions, starting with the assault in the hospital. The nurse and security guard testified, detailing the moment they intervened during Kevin's violent outburst. Their statements were compelling, painting a vivid picture of the attack. Next, Amanda presented the medical records, which documented not only the injuries from the accident, but also the additional bruising caused by Kevin's punches. Photos of my injuries were displayed in the courtroom, and as I sat there, I could feel the weight of the evidence settle in, each image a painful reminder of the abuse I had suffered. Kevin's lawyer attempted to downplay the incident, calling it a moment of frustration, a one-off, and arguing that Kevin had already apologized, but Amanda wasn't having any of it. She stood firm, her presence unwavering, as she methodically dismantled every excuse. "This isn't just about one incident," Amanda's voice rang through the room. "This is the culmination of years of cruelty, manipulation, and violence. Sarah has endured enough, and it's time for her to receive justice." Her words hit home harder than I expected. Finally, someone understood. The weight of everything I had endured over the years, those subtle moments of emotional neglect, the cruel remarks, the occasional violence was being acknowledged, and it felt like a light breaking through the clouds. When Kevin took the stand, his attempts to shift blame were weak and unconvincing. "She's exaggerating," he stammered, his voice trembling slightly. "I've done everything for this family, and she's the one trying to ruin me." The smug arrogance he had always carried was slipping away piece by piece. Amanda's cross-examination was relentless. She forced Kevin to admit his failures as a husband, a father, and a human being. She brought up every instance where he had neglected his responsibilities, exposing him for the coward he was. By the time she finished, he was visibly shaken, his bravado evaporating. His defenses had crumbled entirely. Hours of testimony passed before the judge finally delivered the verdict. Kevin was found guilty of assault and domestic abuse. The gavel struck, echoing in my ears, and with it came a wave of relief that I didn't know I'd been holding back. Kevin's conviction marked the end of a chapter, and though it couldn't undo the years of pain, it was justice, and I had earned it. Walking out of the courthouse with my parents by my side, their steady support a lifeline, I realized just how far I had come. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the constant fear, from the weight of Kevin's control, and from the relentless judgment of a marriage built on lies. In the weeks following the verdict, I found a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't large, but it was everything I needed to start anew. Each piece of furniture, every decoration, felt like a small victory. Our new space wasn't just walls and rooms, it was a symbol of everything I had fought for. Emma's laughter filled the apartment, and for the first time, the sound was one of hope, not fear. Determined to create a future for her, I decided to do something I had never thought possible: share my story. One evening, as Emma and I sat watching videos together, it hit me. I could help others who might be struggling like I once had. With my parents' encouragement, I started a YouTube channel. I shared my journey surviving an abusive marriage, fighting for justice, and rebuilding a life from the ground up. I spoke about the resilience it took to heal, the importance of self-care, and how even the smallest victories were worth celebrating. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. Viewers began reaching out, sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking out. The comments flooded in, each one a reminder that I was no longer alone. Brands contacted me, offering collaborations, and the income from my channel grew beyond my expectations. For the first time in years, I felt financially independent. The success of the channel allowed me to not only secure Emma's future, but also fulfill dreams I had long put on hold. I started saving for her education and planning trips for us, making memories that I hoped would stay with her forever. The apartment that had once felt like a temporary stop became our home, a place of love and laughter. Every night, as Emma and I cooked dinner together or curled up on the couch to watch her favorite shows, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was no longer the woman Kevin had tried to break. I was stronger, wiser, and happier. With Emma by my side, I knew our future was bright. But can a legal victory truly heal the deep wounds I've endured? Can I really escape the shadows of the past and rebuild a life for myself and Emma? As I walked into the courtroom, anxiety surged, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't allow Kevin and everything he had done to continue destroying my life. Despite the haunting past, today I was no longer the weak woman I once was. Everything I was doing now wasn't just for me. It was for Emma, for our future. And I wouldn't let anyone, not even Kevin, take that from me again. Do you think Kevin truly deserves this punishment? If you were in my shoes, what would you do in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay updated with more stories to come, and join us in building a strong, resilient community. Thank you for always being a part of this journey.